The Las Meninas was painted by Diego Vasquez in 1656 during the Baroque period and is currently presented in the Museo del Prado in Madrid. Diego Vasquez was born on June 6, 1599, in Sevilla, Spain. His career began as a court painter for King Philip IV, and he was surprisingly the only artist allowed to depict the king. We know much about the Las Meninas as an 18th century historian and court painter, Antonio Palomino, wrote a book on Spanish painters in 1724. In this book, he specifically included a section for Vasquez. The Las Meninas' literal meaning is the ladies-in-waiting, or the maids. It is said that the Piazza Principal in the Royal Alcazar of Madrid, the living quarters of the deceased Prince Baltasar Carlos, later became Vasquez's personal art studio. In the center of the Las Meninas is Infanta Margarita Teresa, a young princess that was one of the 12 children of King Philip IV. On the left and right are the Meninas, Maria Agustina Sarmiento and Isabel de Velasco. More toward the right are the dwarf Maria Balboa and court jester Nicolasito Perchusato, along with a dog who was unidentified. Behind the Menina, standing to the right of the Infanta, is the nun Marcela de Ulia, talking with an unidentified guard. All the way to the left side of the painting, we can see Diego Vasquez himself. In the back, near the staircase, is Jose Nieto Vasquez. On the back wall are two paintings from the scenes of Ovid's Metamorphoses. Lastly, to the left of Jose Nieto Vasquez is a mirror reflecting King Philip IV of Spain with Queen Mariana, painted with oil paints on a large canvas sizing to about 10.5 feet tall to 9 feet wide. At a close view, you can see that the painting consists of many individual loose strokes and layers of paint, which create a coherent and complete detailed picture as a result. Vasquez uses the style Caravaggio Tanaberism, meaning dark, gloomy, and mysterious by dramatic illumination. He also uses the technique of chiaroscuro, the use of strong contrast between the light and shadow to give objects volume and depth. Here are some examples of paintings that use the style of Tanaberism and the technique of chiaroscuro, and it obviously shows the use of dark and light contrast. In addition, Vasquez uses the contrasting light and dark values to intensify the appearance of some colors. We can see this in action throughout the painting, as there are hints of red in certain areas. For example, the bow on Infanta's head is actually red ochre, which is an earthy and dull type of red, but it appears as a bright red, as it is surrounded by shades of gray. Moreover, the Las Meninas is a Baroque-styled painting, inspired by Italian Renaissance artists. The Baroque period was from the 17th to 18th century and overlapped with the Italian Renaissance period, which explains their similar styles. The Las Meninas also use realism, a technique in which subjects are depicted in a scene of everyday life with naturalistic manner, and we can see this as the figures seem to be interrupted in the Las Meninas. He used the minimum of underdrawing and loosely applied paint that resulted with highlights in white, yellow, and orange to represent reflected light. Shockingly, the meaning of the Las Meninas has not been settled, and many historians that examine his art are still debating about Vasquez's true purpose. Though the painting displays the young and royal Princess Infanta, historians do not consider the Las Meninas as a royal painting, but instead as a genre painting. The Las Meninas gives a sense of a snapshot as 6 figures are looking at the front, possibly noticing the king and queen's presence, as shown by the reflection in the mirror from the back wall. Unlike traditional royal portraits that depict serious and stiff faces, the scene in the Las Meninas does not seem staged and shows the normal life of royals, making them seem more human than the public thinks. It also shows the normal people can be painted as well, like the Meninas and the court jester with his dog. Vasquez uses the Las Meninas to promote his own social status and to prove that artists deserved more respect, as artists had the same social status as blacksmiths and tailors during the time of Vasquez's career. The first piece of evidence that shows that Vasquez was trying to promote his social status is that he actually drew himself standing among royalty and even blurred out the image of the king and queen when they should be the main figures of the painting. This is why some historians consider thinking of the Las Meninas as a self-portrait instead of the royal painting. The second is that Vasquez carries the keys to the king's chamber on his belt, showing that the king has deep trust in him. The third piece of evidence is that the room he is in is of the deceased crown prince, as mentioned before, and it was personally gifted to him by the king. Another way Vasquez attempted to raise his social status is by painting himself as the highest figure in the room, even higher than the mirror of the king and queen. Moreover, Vasquez shows this again with the cross on his chest. The cross is the Order of Santiago, of prestigious religious military order granted by the king, and this symbol represents knighthood. This cross is one of the main reasons why the date painted and finished of the Las Meninas is often debated about. An inventory of the royal collection records the 1665 painting of the Infanta, and this can be connected to the Las Meninas, as the Infanta was born in 1651, and in the painting, she appears to be 5 to 6 years old. However, the red cross on Santiago on Vasquez's chest does not support this date because Vasquez was knighted in November 1659, which was 3 years after the painting was supposedly finished. According to Antonio Palonomi, the Las Meninas was also part of Vasquez's campaign to knighthood, as he wanted to become a member of the Knighthood of Santiago, but they wouldn't accept him because he had artist status and was of Jewish descent. This presents another reason to why Vasquez would use the Las Meninas to raise his status and to show his desire to attain knighthood. An alternative theory was that King Philip IV himself added the cross on Vasquez's chest after Vasquez's death in August of 1660, but conservators that study the painting have concluded that there are no 2 layers of paint, which proves that the cross was part of the original painting. As Vasquez was also wanting to prove that art deserves more respect, he depicted the 2 paintings of scenes from Ovid's Metamorphoses, a poem consisting of Greek mythology and history that was originally painted by Peter Paul Rubens purposely on the back wall. The painting on the left depicts the goddess Athena challenging the mortal Arachne to a weaving contest, while the painting on the right depicts the mortal Marsyas challenging the god Apollo to a flute-playing contest. Although Marsyas loses and Arachne wins the contest, both are punished by the gods as they had tried to insult them for not recognizing their artistic skill. This story is relevant to the Las Meninas because artists are almost equally respected to blacksmiths, tailors, and musicians, as stated before. Vasquez shows that he can use art too to represent the interesting things that he can do and the importance of art instead of the glorious royalty, which is another reason why he doesn't put the king and queen into importance. Vasquez has clearly confused the viewer by playing with perspective in the Las Meninas. As said before, the characters in the scene seem to be noticing someone as their faces are towards us, but one of the unseen factors implied by the painting is that looking at the reflection of the mirror can't conclude that they are looking at the king and queen. Originally, this painting was supposed to be hung up at King Philip IV's office, so it could seem like he himself was part of the painting, as well as the viewers, who would be in the shoes of the royal king. However, the perspective lines do not match up to our beliefs. If a mirror were to be reflecting the viewer, the vanishing point would be the mirror that reflects the king and the queen, but this does not support our case. Let's take Leonardo's Last Supper as an example because it's a good reference of one-point perspective. As we add all the perspective lines onto this painting, they all meet up at one point, which is Jesus, who is in the center. If we construct all the perspective lines and axes onto the Las Meninas, we can see that they all don't meet up at a single spot. The red diagonal and vertical lines intersect at the center. The green line is the midpoint of the back wall, and the blue lines are the orthogonals of the perspective system. The red line falling on the Infanta, the green line on the mirror, and the blue lines on the hallway where Nieto is standing. These are the 3 focal points Vasquez gives us. If we happen to follow the perspective orthogonals, which are the blue lines, the finishing point is at the hallway in the back, which tells us that the mirror is not directly facing toward us or the king at the time, but at an angle. Perhaps the mirror on the back wall is reflecting the large canvas that Vasquez is working on, which is another unseen factor shown in the Las Meninas. The use of the mirror on the back wall of the Las Meninas was likely to be influenced by Jan van Eyck's artwork, notably the portrait of Giovanni Arnolfini and his wife, as it includes a mirror as well. Jan van Eyck was also known as one of the first artists to implement perspective and the first to practice oil painting, which would have again influenced Vasquez to toy with perspective. Vasquez's Caravaggio Tannerism style and chiaroscuro technique, along with his splotchy and sloppy technique, influenced several future artists, including Pablo Picasso, one of the most famous artists in the world, who happened to have painted a version of the Las Meninas himself. Other future artists took the lessons of the Las Meninas to enhance their own artwork. The Order of Things, a book by Michael Foucault, applauds the Las Meninas to be the painting that marks the transition from the classical way of thinking to the modern way of thinking. The Las Meninas is actually a painting about painting. Vasquez wants to raise the status of art as it wasn't respected by many in the past. He wants to show the world the power and importance of art, specifically his art, through this elaborate painting.